Alright, fine, this episode was fire. I know this is gonna sound like sacrilege after the last time I talked about a circus, but I don't really have anything to complain about on this one. Mammon's magnificent musical mid-season special, featuring Fizzarali, was easily one of the best episodes of Helluva we've had in a while. Probably this was my favorite one all season, with it making some things very clear in hindsight about what they were doing in Oops, not to mention dropping a banger hateable villain in Mammon, who was just delightfully terrible. But then the episode just takes a hard pivot into a serious exploration of imposter syndrome and toxic fandoms. I think this episode accomplished everything it was trying to do, and it did so while playing to all of Helluva's strengths. From insanely fun musical numbers, sincere moments that will make a normal person cry, and ships. All the ships.
So, who tops?
So let's break down this episode and I'll give my thoughts, which is all the thoughts, as I could barely catch them, because this episode is paced like a panic attack. So this episode is a wild-ass ride. The only time it ever slows down is to kick a quiet moment out the door before immediately speeding up again. Unlike other previous episodes where that has been a problem, this time around it's very much intentional, conveying this sense of constant emotion and dread that's gripping Fizzarali, who is in the middle of an extended pre-panic attack. With him desperately trying to win Mammon's competition out of fear of losing everything that he has, believing that he will lose Osmodius if he loses this sponsorship. The stakes are high, Fizzarali is all over the place, and this episode's energy is wild. And if it's a little bit too much for you, I get it. But between Fizz trying not to freak out, the songs, the brief respites where you never get just enough time to get fully comfortable, I think it all does an amazing job of putting you in Fizz's headspace, which is being terrified.
Oh, okay, Fizz, you can do this. You can do this. You can do this. It's okay, it's fine.
Now let's get into Fizz, as he is the main reason that this episode is as strong as it is, with us seeing the hopes and dreams to exploitation pipeline in full effect here. The episode starts with a young Fizz and Blitz watching Mammon perform, though I'm using the term perform loosely since most of what he does is hyping himself up and trying to sucker some poor innocent souls into being his new cash cow, with Fizz falling hook, line, and sinker for this, as this man, as far as we know, doesn't have a father, so he is desperately looking for a father figure, with this giving us an easy way of understanding just how Fizz fell into the life that he has. As while he has always been talented, we've never known exactly why he loves show business or why he would pursue it as a career, especially when you wonder just how did he become the mascot of an evil corporation that has monetized and abused every inch of his existence, despite his clear unhappiness with his fans, or at least the creepy ones. Well, the sad real-life answer for all of that is getting them while they're young.
It's not about that. It's getting to work with my idol. I just love that he's giving someone new the chance to be in the spotlight.
Fizz is a massive Mammon fanboy. He sees him as his idol, with him aspiring to be someone on his level or to just even be on the same stage as him. This optimism and hero worship leads Fizz to not really see Mammon for the massive asshole that he actually is. Like, the dude isn't even trying.
It's not exploitation. If you think that, then you're a dickhead.
Also, really glad how this is the one and only time they drag out a joke in the entire episode. Just huge relief. But Mammon represents that place a lot of big named actors or studios hold in our hearts. Think of Mammon like, oh, I don't know, Disney. Inconceivable, I know, but Disney holds a very special place in millions of people's hearts. It was a constant companion to most of our childhoods. So when a lot of people inspired grow up to be in said field, to want to create or to just be part of the magic, companies are able to leverage that goodwill to demand more and more out of their workers till they run themselves ragged and ultimately get replaced. With that magic of childhood and that dream of working with your idol, meaning a lot of people will ignore or excuse their own exploitation, with Mammon collecting bags of money, but the only ones as employees are getting are the ones underneath their eyes. This is Mammon's whole deal. It's why he started a competition rather than hiring somebody new, as he was probably banking on getting somebody young and hungry who wouldn't advocate for themselves, which is just a level of real-world shittiness that I think works really well for the sin of greed. It makes this whole episode so fascinating as we get a peek behind the curtain, and this just goes a long way to explain Fizz's nature and his just role in the story, and especially his relationship with Mammon, as Mammon is a massive piece of shit.
Get your shit together, Fizzy. You're a bloody legend.
Like, the dude is obviously awful, and I'm kind of glad after all the recent deadly sins being just semi-reasonable to sweethearts, we finally got one who is just an asshole. Now personally, I think I would have him just give just a little bit more carrot before emotionally beating Fizz with that stick. But in the unchecked world of the Has-Been-verse, a symbol of capitalistic greed was never gonna be subtle, nor should he.
Winner will get to be like the son I never had. And I'll be like the stepdad that will love you when it's convenient.
Wow.
Honestly though, I love Mammon, not just because he's voiced by Michael Cusack of Smiling Friends fame, but the man is just...
What a perfect asshole.
Mammon hits that stellar sweet spot of just being perfectly hateable, and every second he speaks without broken teeth is a second too long, and I am waiting for it. He's big, he's mean, and he's aggressively profiting off of other people's labor, treating Fizz like a commodity to be bought and sold, and to add insult to injury despite 10 years worth of profits, the man is still forcing him to jump through hoops to stay in his good graces. To Mammon, Fizz is just a product, not a person, which is the beautiful counterpoint to Fizz's soft-hearted lover Asmodeus, who loves Fizz for who he is, scars and all. Mammon relishes having just absolute power over Fizz, forcing him to work himself to the bone, or in this case metal, continually making him do things he's not fully comfortable with in the name of making himself more money, with it being Fizz who has to just excuse and come up with his own reasons for doing this every day. But these brief moments of feeling like he's actually doing something more meaningful are cut off by Fizz living in near constant fear of being replaced by Mammon, that he might be replaced by someone new, that he has to constantly earn the right to be here, and when he has more than done that. In this sense of having to fight for his own survival, leading Fizz to ignore his better half, his mental health, and every red flag in existence, as he's too busy racing towards the finish line to notice, even though that finish line is just another milestone, and he's gonna have to keep doing this same shit again next year. It's genuinely horrific. It is true exploitation, with us being forced to watch Fizz in his youth go from happy and naive to being anxious about his own self-worth, to then watch him become Mammon's cash cow, who uses that anxiety and imposter syndrome to keep Fizz under his thumb. Like, the only thing you can register as being not terrible being the one time he gives him the courtesy of letting his competitors go first, as Mammon recognized that he was about to have a breakdown in public, and that would be bad for business. So he gave Fizz, out of the kindness of his heart, a few minutes to not break down in public. That's the only time that Mammon is actually gonna pretend to care, when Fizz is about to snap, and it'll affect Mammon's bottom line. Blitz, to his credit, is able to call this bullshit from a mile away. He's grown up with an abusive father figure, so he knows the vibe. But Fizz, being slightly protected thanks to his talent from Fizz's worse half, couldn't see the trap that he was walking into until it was too late. And even when he was there, he still didn't realize that he really doesn't need this. Which is why it's so satisfying to finally see him tell Mammon to fuck you. As this is a story about Fizz rejecting Mammon, about him realizing that he doesn't have to keep putting himself through this abuse for someone who clearly doesn't value him, that his true fans and that the people who love him and his work will continue to love him regardless of whose brand he's under, and that everything good in his life isn't tied to his job, that his self-hatred issues of being an imp, being damaged, doesn't affect how others think of him, and that his job is not the answer to those insecurities but their source, and those that don't love him for not being perfect can all fuck off. Which brings us to the other thing that I loved about this episode, which is when they explored the creepy side of fandom, aka the fans. Before we get to that, did you guys know that I'm in a pilot? The cat's in a tree, it's because we want to be there. Leave us the fuck alone. Yeah, that's me. A deep cut of Cartoon Universe fame reached out to me, and I figured, honestly, why the hell not? I voiced a cat, loved every second of it. So please, go check out Garden Heart, it's only 6 minutes long, and the link is down in the comments. It's a story of a burnt out, grown up magical girl struggling to raise the next generation of heroes, and all the other baggage that came along with it. It's tons of fun, so go give it a watch. Yes, I'm basically voicing a Pokemon, and I'm loving it. But fandoms, they're terrifying. And I'm doing a video on the Has-Been fandom later this week. But I really love how this episode goes into like the weird possessiveness that comes with certain fans, as this rando shows up, clearly already a problem. He's apparently been stalking Fizz from just his circus performances, then shows up out of the blue, gets way too familiar way too quickly, with Fizz, perpetual people pleaser, freezing up as he has no idea how to handle this, which is very understandable. This stalker, he's cray-cray. He's every artist or semi-famous person's nightmare as he shows up and insists that the two of them have some kind of connection. assumption that him just liking the things that Fizz makes somehow means that he also must be able to make those things. And if only they just work together, they can all achieve even greater glory. Despite the man having zero previous experience, they'll just become megastars. The man is basically Syndrome from The Incredibles. He's delusional, with him crafting this entitled narrative in his head that he's deserving of fame and adoration, that he deserves Fizz's attention. With him not realizing that he's breaking so many boundaries by doing what he's doing, by taking his hand, by just showing up and pitching an idea, insisting that they need to work together, ignoring how clearly uncomfortable Fizz is with all of this. And it really does convey just the shallowness of this, as some people are more concerned about what you make than who you are as a person, but also feel like they know who you are. The parasocialness of the internet is terrifying. People can believe just because they watch someone's carefully curated online persona or work, that they somehow know the real person behind it. This leads to entitlement, that the creator owes them something, when that could not be farther from the truth. Well, what's worse though is that from being rejected, to set any boundaries. There is a tendency for certain fans to just not let this go, to not take it well, or to not really move on or grow, and to turn that passion for a project or person into a grudge, with it just consuming their lives. This dude would be so much happier if he left Fizz alone and found some other thing to love, or even maybe just make something for a change. But instead, he stuck around and would waste his life hating the guy and being toxic. With any semblance of valid critique and Fizz's status as an entertainer versus being a mascot not mattering, as really all this guy is going for is to get a reaction, to get attention, and to hurt Fizz just a little bit so that for a moment the hater can feel vindicated and important after Fizz's betrayal. This shit happens in real life all the time. And this kind of overly obsessed turned hater experience is something I'm sure Vizzy Pop has experienced at some point in her career. I know I've seen disproportionate backlash happen a lot, but to me, there's always that one fucking wacko. There's the one person that goes way too far, and it is a nightmare for your mental health. It can fuck up your day, and it's why people should really not do it. But all this stuff is why I really find this whole episode fascinating. This dark look at corporate and celebrity culture is really what gives this episode just so much zest. As all these struggles, everything that he has to go through, it really does make us relate to the guy, and it nearly made him one of my favorite characters in the show. As after seeing all the shit he's been put through, it's really hard not to feel bad for the guy. We spent so much time thinking he was going to be this antagonistic force, but he's just as fucked by life as Blitz was, just on the other end of the money spectrum. While Blitz is way better at hiding it, Fizz's insecurities are always bubbling to the surface, leaving him vulnerable and us just really wishing this guy would get help. Watching him ignore good sense, put himself in an environment that is actively harmful, all of it for this abusive pseudo-father figure, you get why this guy is one long breath away from a panic attack, as his coping mechanism is to keep himself busy, to not think about how much his hands are shaking or how his throat keeps feeling tighter. And as someone who also has an anxiety disorder, I feel seen. And I hate it. But speaking of being seen, this is the gem of the episode, but I love the scene of Fizz with the deaf fan, as after all the crazy, after the non-stop momentum of this episode, to give Fizz just a moment where things can slow down and he gets a chance to connect with somebody was a breath of fresh air. Fizz, low-key, hates his job, but he loves being able to connect with his fans, to inspire them the same way Mammon inspired him. It's simple, it's emotional, and like I always say, Helluva is really good at having these sincere, genuine moments in between all the madness. There's something to be said about how big and obvious these gut punches are. Like, this is Tiny Tim levels of cry porn. But it works. Helluva has tons of subtle writing when it comes to its characters, but when it's trying to make you laugh, gross out, or just bawl your eyes out, it goes over the top and is giving 110%. That's just how this show rolls, and while it may not work every time, when it works, it really works. With it making great thematic as well as character sense here. As well, it's easy to forget, Fizz is also a member of the disability community. He's a quadruple amputee with robotic limbs. He's gonna make time for someone he sees himself in, as if he won't, what other celebrity in hell will? While he won't admit it, his hero let him down, and he doesn't want to do the same. Fizz was amazing this episode. Ozzy was also great being this protective mother hen, as he truly wants the best for his man. He full-on outed his relationship with Fizz, was ready to fight Mammon for him, and the song was just delish. I thought I was well fed last episode, but I might actually be stuffed after all this fizzy content. Though that does bring me back to the Blitz situation, as while I'm stuffed on all the Fizz and Ozzy content, by the time the episode ends, I'm not fully convinced that we really needed Blitz in this episode. Like truly, keep the flashback, have Ozzy murder the fan. Blitz doesn't do anything wrong, he's fun, but at no point in this episode does he feel like he needs to be here. He's not fully superfluous, he's not bad, he doesn't take away, but really he feels like he's just here to be a soundboard for Fizz so he can have these conversations with someone other than Ozzy. I can kind of understand why he's here, but I also would have been very okay if he just sat this one out. Though I say this as someone who's been very critical of this show's inability to sideline his ass for a bit, as while I love Blitz, some stories would have been better served if we got to spend more time with other characters. They fully got away with it here, but they just didn't sell me on his presence. Though that top joke at the end was hilarious.
So, who tops?
Also, for everyone who said that Fizz and Blitz aren't friends now and gave me shit for saying the show is speedrunning their reconciliation, because no, they didn't, they're actually still healing, yada yada yada. Yep, they're basically casual with each other now. So my point is vindicated, as bickering and being exhausted to see one another is about as normal as Blitz gets with anybody. So suck it. And of course we gotta give our praise to the production side of things. Everybody who worked on this thing needs a massive round of applause, as this thing is a behemoth. It is a musical extravaganza, a visual feast, and this thing nailed all of it. From the colors to the musical numbers, everything was fired. Juggling is cool as a bop, Clown Bitch was aggressive in how perfect it was for these characters who have names. But I just kept thinking Scanty and Knee Socks. They are also perfectly hateable, and they may have been giving Veroska flashbacks of Blitz because he was very on board with taking them down a peg. Also, their song was great in how it was less of a performance with great visuals and more of a sales pitch to Mammon that they are the new hotness and that they'll make him the most money. Crooked is fantastic, and I'm praying we get something close to this cute for Stolas and Blitz. And 2 minutes single-handedly made me forgive how exhausting Fizz's last song was in Oops. I fully enjoyed this episode. Again, it was probably my favorite episode this season so far. This is Helluva Boss in its musical bag, and it's always a delight. I loved every second of this one, and while I question Blitz being here, this is the first episode since Ozzy's where I have no notes. But I do have stray thoughts, so let's just run down some of the stuff that I might turn into shorts later. I don't know if you guys caught this, but this episode did add a fascinating new wrinkle to the timeline of events. As we know, based on Fizz saying he and Blitz haven't met in 15 years. Meaning the explosion happened like 15 years ago. However, Fizz has only won this clown tournament 10 years in a row, meaning that there is a 5-year gap where we don't know what happened to Fizz. We don't know how he got the money to get those robotic appendages, how he was able to win the favor of Mammon, which begs questions on just who was keeping the boys apart and really who rebuilt Fizz. As before, it always felt like a safe assumption that the answer was Mammon, and given Fizz's desperation to keep his job to be worthy of Oz, Ozzy couldn't have been the one to rebuild him, which just begs new questions. Also, for how much money was sunk into rebuilding Fizz's appearance, it's kind of surprising that Fizz hasn't gotten horn implants, or has been forced to for marketing purposes. He doesn't have them to make the scene where he takes off his hat more shocking and show off the more ragged and damaged side of him that he desperately tries to keep hidden, but in a world where perfection is demanded, kind of surprising that fixing them up with synthetics was never an option that was explored. Maybe it just would have fucked with the hat maybe. As you just know, if they can give robotic limbs, they can do synthetic horns. Also, I love how Mammon keeps censoring himself only to stop halfway through. It's really funny when you realize he swears at exactly 30 seconds only to drop an F-bomb 1 sentence later. And it's probably a fun little nod to YouTube's swearing policy, which is kinda nebulous, but swearing is usually avoided in the first 15 to 30 seconds to avoid limited ads. Creating a fun joke about Mammon's own money whore tendencies as he fakes being for all ages only to immediately start cussing like a sailor. The dude gives big Glomgold from DuckTales energy, and I am all about it. Though I would have given a lot more to see Asmodeus beat his ass. I love seeing all the Sin super modes. Mammon being a spider who's trapped Fizz in his web is very fitting, and made me feel like a dummy for not noticing all the spider webs in nearly every background. Curious to see what the repercussions will be for Ozzy, if any, for dating Fizz, as the only people who can really punch him for this is Lucifer and Lilith, but unless this affects their bottom line, I don't see any formal punishment coming his way. So really, this might be more of a PR thing, but we don't really know if anyone's gonna be that reckless as to talk shit about his reputation. We already know that the news was slandering Fizz, so it'll be curious to see if this will be played upon later, or maybe this will inspire Stolas to pursue his own relationship with Blitz. The women aren't funny line, followed by written by Vivian Medrano, popping up was comedy gold. Very curious to see what Fizz's home situation is, as he clearly was still hungry for a father figure. But while we know Cash flaunted the "I wish you were my son" energy, I wonder if Fizz was an actual orphan that they picked up, or if there's something more like Dick Grayson, where he had parents who worked at a circus, but they unfortunately passed, which left him to be exploited by an older man. Blitz is also still into horse shit. Let's just take a moment to be thankful he hasn't discovered My Little Pony. Also, Slim Ozzy. Never thought we were gonna see him again, and he looks way too much like V. But since he apparently can't fit through doors, it does make sense that he would use that form. But honestly, I think that's gonna be all for me. Tell me what you all thought of the episode. What other Helluva Boss topics should I talk about? Like, share, and subscribe, all that corporate shit. Love you all, peace out.